Scott, you were the reviewer for Dishonored 2 for us, and you quite liked the game. Am I right?
It's fantastic. It's a really, really great game. I had people yelling at me in the comments for not giving it a 9. Like I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Wait. People are being rude in the comments?
I know, right?
They're mad about your score?
Unprecedented. You wouldn't believe. Like this is unheard of behavior.
So tell me, what is fundamentally different this time around about the game?
Sure. To be completely honest, it's not drastically different from the first game. I mean, it still plays on all of the same major pillars. It is both a stealth and an action game simultaneously. It allows you to play either way, feels fully fleshed out and robust. I mean, they've certainly added new options for both play styles since the original game, but the core, like the fundamentals of what makes Dishonored work are the same as they were in the first game. So that's like player creativity, being able to approach situations from different angles, high chaos versus low chaos, like basically killing people or not killing people. There's still story-driven ways to deal with all of your major targets. So a lot of the principles that guided the first game are still present in this game. But there's a new protagonist, Emily Caldwin, who was very young in the previous game. She's now aged 15 years, and she's the second playable protagonist and has her own set of powers. So you can still play as Corvo, the original hero, and still have all his original powers, but now you can play as Emily as well. So they've definitely added stuff without fundamentally altering what the game is.
So do those two characters feel like really different? I mean, obviously the power sets are different, but like in practice, like in terms of how you approach a mission, do you feel like it's worth playing as both?
Yes and no. I mean, to me, what's more interesting about choosing how you play is going loud or going silent. That to me is a much bigger decision. Emily and Corvo in most ways are identical. Like movement and basic melee, things like that are essentially identical between the two characters. The biggest differences are the powers that they have access to, but even those, there are often analogous powers. Like for example, Corvo has blink so he can teleport around, and Emily has far reach, which functions very similarly and allows her to access distant places. So it really just depends on like what powers sound interesting to you. And if you've played the first game, definitely check out Emily because all of her powers are super cool and clearly learned lessons from things people wanted out of the first game. So you can like hypnotize enemies with her. You can turn into like a moving shadow and assassinate people. So it just kind of depends on what sounds interesting to you. The bigger choice really is, are you going to try to play stealthy or are you just going to like wreak havoc? And that to me is actually, I mean, I talked about this in the review that I really like stealth games and I generally will play stealth if that's an option. But messing around in Dishonored is so much fun. Like all the different things you can do. There's, from throwing people into electrified gates to, stopping time and placing them in front of their own bullets, things like that. I mean, just the amount of creativity you can employ while making your way through the game is kind of unlike anything else. I mean, it's not completely new. I mean, we've seen it in games like BioShock, but I think that Dishonored probably does it better than any game currently available. And that is what makes it an amazing game.
Jake, how did you play? I know that you played a lot as well. Are you stealthy?
So my main game, I mostly play stealthy. Like that's how I play game. Like when I can, I always do stealth. But I've played.
Why?
It's more satisfying.
Okay.
I think it's more satisfying. It takes a lot longer though. But to be honest, I've played through at least the first 5 missions, maybe like 6 or 7 times now, just for like capturing different things. And I've played stealth. I've played assault. I've played high chaos. I've played low chaos. And like Scott was saying, like whatever you play, you're probably gonna have fun. But I think maybe don't play it 5 times, but I think this game really shines when you start playing it a second time, because then you feel more comfortable with what you can do and your powers and like different pathways. It's second time is so much fun.
There's definitely a learning curve. Like once you kind of understand how the game operates and what you can kind of do within the confines of the world, you start to have a lot more fun. Like the first couple hours, actually, I almost didn't enjoy the game because I was just so like bewildered and frustrated and like couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do. And then finally figured out like, oh, okay, this is kind of how this game just works. And once I kind of got into it, it really opens up. And yeah, if you're able to, and willing to put in that time up front, you're absolutely rewarded for that initial investment.
And you were saying though in your review, like at the end of the game, you felt as though that you had kind of mastered all of your tools and the game didn't meet you halfway. It didn't continue to ramp up the challenge or offer like a new scenario that you just hadn't encountered before. Can you, I guess, describe that a little bit? Like why?
Yeah, I definitely want to expand on this because this was something that was difficult to articulate and something that I think a lot of people took issue with in the comments. So I'm going to do my best to like explain it more thoroughly now because it was hard. Like I hate seeing in comments people being like, I don't understand this point or like I don't understand this criticism because that means that I kind of failed in that, at least in that portion of the review. So the best way I can explain it is, as you play the game, you're gathering runes, you're unlocking new powers, you're upgrading pretty consistently. You don't have to, like, you can ignore powers completely if you want, but part of what makes the game fun is unlocking new powers and seeing what you can do with them. To me, that's kind of like the engine that drives the entire experience forward. So as you do that, as you unlock these new things, you are inevitably becoming more and more powerful. You can do more stuff. The stuff you can do is leveled up and has a bigger impact on the world, is simply more powerful. So your character is kind of on an upward arc throughout the entire experience. And the game, the difficulty and the challenge is also on an upward arc, but it doesn't quite keep pace with your growth as a character. So by the end, I felt like my level of power had exceeded the challenge presented by the game. And I don't mean, oh, I wasn't dying enough, or, oh, I wanted to, like, you know, take more damage from enemies and, you know, deal less damage to them. I just mean, like, I wish there had been more scenarios that had challenged me in new ways.
Intellectually, right?
Yeah, like, so I have all these new powers. Give me new things to do with them. Present me with new situations where I have to rethink the things I've been doing all game. Yeah. Because by the end, I was actually thinking less about what I was doing because I was so much more easily able to make my way through things. And I feel like it should kind of be the inverse. So again, that's difficult to explain if you haven't made it through the end. I had a bunch of people be like, I played the first 5 hours and this game is brilliant. I'm like, talk to me when you get to hour 16, because it's not like the game gets bad. I just wish there had been more of a culmination. I wish that all of the different things that had been thrown at you kind of came together in like really grand challenge at the end that really made you rethink the way you've been playing the game, or challenge you to use all of your different options sort of in concert with one another in a new way.
Yeah.
Anything like that. And it's not like the game fails to do that. I just wish it had done it more. And part what sort of compounds this problem is that there's no sort of new game plus option. So by the time you make it to the end and by the time you've unlocked all these powers, you really only have like 1, maybe 2 levels in which to use those powers, because you can't backtrack.
That's true.
And use the stuff you've unlocked. So like, hey, I have this cool new tool. Like, I have this thing I unlocked that I want to try. You only have a really short amount of time to actually do it.
That's a real bummer.
You've run out of game. And there's no way to go back. Like,
right.
If you've saved at every level, you can go replay a level on a higher difficulty, but you still don't have the new powers that you earned by the end of the game. So you get to the end and you've unlocked all these powers, and then you're just done, and they're just gone. And it's like, that's kind of unsatisfying. So again, it's not like this is a massive failing on the game's part, but it's something that I found to be a bit of a letdown when I've made it to the end. Yeah. So that to me is part of why I scored it. And I did grapple with the score. Like, I absolutely flirted with the idea of giving it a 9, but this discussion is in part why I lowered the score. The other big reason is the story, but I feel like I've kind of droned on a lot about the game already, so we can get into story if you want.
Oh,
but
Jake,
I do have a question though, because one of the big problems, criticisms, I guess, with the first one was that the ending kind of like punished you if you chose to play High Chaos. Now, obviously, don't spoil anything, but like, does the ending feel like you're being punished if you play a certain way?
It didn't. No, not really.
Okay.
Although interestingly, the game, at least from a narrative standpoint, goes out of its way to encourage you to play stealth. And there's nothing mechanically forcing you to. You're not really punished. But at the very beginning of the game, the outsider, who's this character who gives you your powers in the first place, has some line where he's like, are you clever enough to save the world without spilling a river of blood? Like, sort of goading you into playing stealthily.
Yeah.
And there are sort of narrative consequences for playing High Chaos, but I don't remember there really being any in my sort of like 2 playthroughs. No, I don't think I was really punished, or like it was.
Yeah,
you know,
the first one, it was like, you killed too many people, rats took over the city, and everyone's dead. It's like,
so that
all right,
does kind of happen. So the game absolutely changes. Both the narrative and the world itself change depending on how many people you've killed. So in this game, rather than rats, it's blood flies, who are like flies that spawn in the bodies, like in dead bodies. So you'll see more of them, but they're also not like a huge threat. So it kind of makes it more difficult to access certain areas. But generally, there are no areas that are completely blocked off. It's just like, oh, you've now made your own life more difficult. It doesn't close doors. It just like pushes them, like, you know, it just makes your life a little trickier. That's all. So it's not really a punishment. It's just like, feels like an actual consequence for the way you've chosen to play the game. So I really like the way that the game handles that, actually. I think it's really impressive the way that they sort of scale the experience depending on how you've chosen to play.
Okay, final quick question.
Sure.
Any differences on PS4 Pro?
I've not had a chance to play the game on PS4 Pro. I know that people were having some trouble on PC, and I played the game on PS4, so I apologize to PC gamers who may have wanted insight into their particular platform. But my understanding is those problems weren't didn't necessarily affect everybody, and many of those have already been resolved. So apologies to PC players if you were experiencing issues, but with any luck, the game itself, when it's functioning as it should, is excellent. And by all accounts, it is functioning as it should for most PC players at this point. So apologies for not pointing that out to PC players last week. In terms of PS4 Pro, hopefully we'll have a chance to sit down and play that a bit this week. Haven't had a chance so far, so unfortunately I can't weigh in yet.
All right, no worries. Thank you for all your thoughts on that game. Dishonored 2 is out now. You can go check it out. Make sure to check out Scott's review on GameSpot.com and the video review on YouTube, and leave us some comments. Let us know what you think.